One of the good things about the United States is that by comparative standards, it's quite an open society. We have access to documentary records from the government, which is unusual, maybe unique by historical standards. And we can look at it, and we can investigate to what extent government actions have been motivated by security. And when you investigate that, I think what you discover is, first of all, that there are different kinds of security. There's security for state power. That's constantly protected. There's security for the concentrations of economic power, corporate interests and so on, that are highly influential, overwhelmingly influential in determining state policy. And we find plenty of attention to their security. And then there's the question of security of the population. That turns out to be a very low consideration of very little significance. It's constantly either ignored or overruled in the interests of the real concerns of security. I think I can't demonstrate it here, but I think it's a challenge to look at the record, which we can investigate, and I think that's what you find. And that strongly suggests that the claim to legitimacy of authority in this case is on very shaky foundations and should be very seriously questioned in case after case.
Privacy is really something different and altogether more valuable than what we expect in the common usage. When we talk about privacy today in the modern context, we're really asking the word to do too much work. Privacy means many different things to many different people. Privacy for many people is just settings on their Facebook page. And so they go, I don't really care, it's just Facebook. But privacy is so much more. Brandeis said, privacy is the right to enjoy the products of our own intellect. I would go further. I would say privacy is the fountainhead of all other rights. Privacy is the right to the self. Privacy is the right, as we have in the Constitution, to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom from unreasonable search and seizure without probable cause. Privacy is the right to a free mind. Now, how can I say that, right? That seems sort of abstract, but when you think about it, privacy is what allows us to determine what we believe without being influenced by others, without being subject to peer pressure, without our ideas being prejudged before they're fully formed. Freedom of speech has no meaning if you don't have the space, the time, the freedom to determine what it is that you want to say. Freedom of religion has no value if you cannot independently determine what it is that you believe in. Otherwise, you're being influenced by what's popular or what you inherited. Now, when we go further from this, we realize that this is actually inherently understood by generations of speakers, generations of thinkers, going down all the way to something Mr. Chomsky might understand quite well, which are the underpinnings of our language. It's called private property for a reason. Without privacy, you can't have anything for yourself. You exist as a collective. You exist in a state of reaction to your environment at all times. You are a part of a larger being, but at no time are you permitted to have a space that is only just for you. And when I sort of follow this, and I think about this in my own terms, particularly when we're confronted with the arguments of sort of apologists for the national security state, and the argument that was first proposed by the Nazis against privacy, which was if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. I would say that arguing that you don't care about privacy because you have nothing to hide is like saying that you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. Rights exist and have value for more than just the individual in the current moment. Rights are both individual and collective. And when we think about the value of a free press, we're not all journalists, but we still derive value from them. Moreover, rights are not really intended. Rights are not really designed for use by the elites, the people who are leading our debates, because these are the people who are least threatened with the abrogation of their rights. The system exists to serve and protect these people. Rights are almost always needed on a regular, continuing basis by those who are vulnerable, by those who are not protected by the system, by those who are not protected by their communities, by the people who are different, by the people who are ahead of everyone else, who are proposing a new idea, or people who are simply minorities, don't have access to the same resources, don't have access to the same ability to compete. And to say fundamentally that you don't care about a right, even if it is truly of no value to you, because you're not using it in this current moment and you don't expect to use it in the future, is probably the most antisocial thing I can imagine.
And I'm sure all of you in this room have heard the rationale that's used by people who want to belittle the right to privacy, and I bet you a lot of you even think it yourselves, which is the idea that, well, you know what, I'm not one of the bad people, I'm not planning any terrorist attacks, I'm not engaged in violent crimes, and therefore I don't actually have anything to hide. I don't mind if the government invades my privacy. And what's really fascinating about that I found over the last few years is that even the people who say that, the people who say they don't actually value their privacy, they don't actually mean it at all. And the proof of it is they do all sorts of things to safeguard their own privacy. I mean, we all have things to hide. There are things that everyone in this room would be willing to have their spouse or their best friend or their physician or their lawyer or their psychiatrist know, but would be mortified to have anybody else know. And the people who say they don't value privacy, they do things like they put and use locks on their bedroom and bathroom door. They put passwords on their email and their social media account. They do all sorts of things to ensure there's a place they can go in the world to think and reason and explore without the judgmental eyes of other people being cast upon them. This is really critical to human freedom. We are social animals. We have a need for other people to know and see what we're doing, which is why we post things about ourselves online. But we also have the need to be able to do things without other people watching, because when other people are watching what you're doing, you're much more likely to engage in decision-making that's the byproduct of societal orthodoxies or external expectations and not a byproduct of your own agency and independence. And so when we lose privacy, when we allow ourselves to live in a society where we're susceptible to being monitored at all times, we lose a really critical part of what it means to be a free and fulfilled individual. And as Professor Chomsky was saying, we should not allow that to happen in any circumstance except when the government demonstrates there's a really compelling need.